Welcome to the Influence Factory podcast. This program is dedicated to support professionals who have a desire to develop their digital business influence so they can navigate through a fast-paced, constantly growing digital world. We invite newcomers as well as our family of business influencers to a place to play, share ideas, questions, tips, and guidance with other thought leaders around the globe. Sit back and enjoy our program with your host, Dean Delisle, as he interviews guests. News and commentary are provided by Jackson Delisle and Monica Hacker. Power Move lessons are provided by the Influencer Marketing Department at Social Jack. And production, editing, and distribution is provided by the Social Jack production team.
All right, this week's special guest, I'd like to invite my friend Kelly Benish. She's Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Uberall. Come on in, Kelly. How you doing?
I am wonderful. Thank you for
having me. Oh my God. I'm like, if anybody, it's got to be Kelly, right? I was like, that hasn't happened in 75 episodes, but what the hell?
I've been called worse.
Well, if you have a bad partnership, it could be called the other thing too, right? So, oh my gosh. So how are you doing?
I am doing wonderful. Thanks. How are you?
Good. Where are you at today?
I am in the lovely Charlotte, North Carolina.
How did you guys make out with the big hurricane thing?
It didn't affect me at all. I went up to Cape Cod, actually. But most of my friends here just saw a couple of leaves blowing in the wind. It was mostly the folks on the coast that got slammed.
Yeah, I saw that. So, all right. Well, good to hear that you're safe.
Yeah.
Now, every time that I see you, you have a dog somewhere.
Yes, I do. That's my dogger, as I call her. Her name's Foxy because she looks like a little red fox.
Right. Is that a picture of Foxy behind you?
It is actually a picture of a red fox with a flower.
Right. There you go.
I have Foxy-esque art all over my...
I know every time. Yeah. And so I think that's cool about it because I follow you on Instagram. So it's like I always get the dog pics and things like that. And that's such a cool part of your brand. And I noticed that in one of your talks, you also have dog pictures in your talk. So I just think that's cool. It's part of who you are and all that cool stuff. And then we talked about you when you speak at conferences, you literally have this thing where you do karaoke the night before.
Yeah, it's a great icebreaker. There's nothing like a trauma bond with some of the folks that you're going to be at the conference with the next day. It also just kind of makes things a little bit more light and airy. You don't have all this pressure on you.
Yeah.
It's nice. It's a good networking tool, I think, better than a corporate dinner or a stuffy, going out to drinks. It's definitely a way to just bond with folks.
Yeah, I love it. What's your favorite karaoke song?
Right now, it's Shallow by Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper. It's a little bit depressing. So more of a cheery song is Fuji's Killing Me Softly, and it's a crowd. What about you? Have you done karaoke?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'm a big AC/DC fan, so I'm a little more of a heavy rocker. So I'll do some ballads too, I guess. But yeah, I'll just, Highway to Hell,
Nice.
all of them, So I like, I don't know, let's ask the audience, what's your favorite karaoke song? Type it in as you're listening. So every time I talk with you, you're either going to Amsterdam, coming back, or going to Berlin. And when we talked earlier, you said you're booking tickets to Berlin. So you work with a big nav company that really helps, I'm always curious about that. So is it just the data side, or are you guys actually helping with navigation, logistics, and everything else?
Yeah. So what we offer is really a business model. A lot of our, Stairway to Heaven. I hear you. A lot of our clients just resell our solution, and it's a value-added service to SEO, search engine optimization.
Oh, got it.
We make sure that big brands have their locations on the maps, in apps, and we build audiences for them around being accessible.
So then do you also help people like get on the map, like Google Maps and things like that? So you sell the tools for that?
Yeah, it's a tool and a service. So we not only are we verifying their location and doing all of that heavy lifting on behalf of the client and the partner, but we're making sure that everything's accurate, and accuracy is really the way to go for optimization. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I know a lot of times, well, actually, before we get to this, I heard you make your own soap.
I do. I do.
So,
Have you
so
ever soap? How many chemicals are in it? If you read like the dial box, they're trying to kill us.
So you did it purely because you wanted to just have a healthy soap alternative, or how'd you get started in that?
Yeah. So I'm not really a sweets person. I'm not a baker. If someone dies, I'll like put a casserole together, but I don't really enjoy that. Soap's something that you kind of can build a whole craft around, and you've got different fragrances, you've got different materials, put little wildflowers in the soap. It's a labor of love. It's, I guess, a modern day equivalent of crocheting a baby hat, or I don't know, making a lasagna. I don't know. I enjoy it. It's therapeutic, and a lot of my friends and family have my soap and they use
That's
it.
super cool, though.
I'm gonna send you some.
Yeah, well, that's cool. Oh, we said we were going to get together anyway, so I'll definitely make sure we get some soap. And so, on the flip side of that, my new next hobby is I'm studying to distill bourbon.
That's amazing. Where are you? Is this a destination study? Are you going to the Kentucky Bourbon Trail?
Nope, no, actually, Jackson just came back from the trail, but there's a big bourbon distillery here in Chicago, the only one in Illinois, actually. And I'm going up to meet with them, and they're going to take me through the whole process. But I'm just curious about how it's made, and then I have my own ideas of flavor. So it's funny, and that's all. I was just like, it just came out of nowhere. It was just like, I think I'm going to make some. So
that's a good hobby to have.
Right.
I'll trade you some soap for bourbon.
I was just going to say, I think we might have had some of that. Or no, we were doing tequila, I think, down in St. Louis, right? We had at that Mexican bar that we went to, or whatever that restaurant.
That was amazing.
So we have a couple things in common. Two things: strategic partnerships, and then personal branding. So first and foremost, what I want to find out is, you have a passion for those two areas. We talked about this earlier, but how did you actually wind up getting to like here? Did you like go to school for this, or did you, no? So it was like, how did you wind up here?
It's like a Cinderella story for work. I am horrible at math to this day. When I see numbers, it's like the Da Vinci Code. And when I graduated from school, from uni, it was the height of the economic decline.
Right.
So I was a financial advisor for a while, which was miserable. I just sold elderly people long-term care insurance, basically. And it was a miserable first job. And at night, I bartended to make ends meet. And one of my former CEOs was one of my regulars. So he said, all of the skills that you have, waiting tables, bartending, you can apply to marketing. And that's all she wrote. I've since been in 8 different roles in the industry. I learned some really hard lessons early on, leaving companies after a year for more money. But some of the best advice I ever got was follow the people. So look for great CEOs to work with, and working directly with the C-suite has really helped me to hone my skills early on. So that's kind of how I found my way. The whole social media branding thing just was happenstance. Right. I built a brand for myself, and then one day woke up and everyone was very vocal about it. And it started to get me to realize that literally I get paid to speak to people, which was really cool. The industry that I started out in was primarily like newspapers and old school traditional media. And it was a older male dominated field. So I'd show up at conferences and I'd be standing there trying to get into a conversation, and I was completely blocked out. And I tried too hard. I really tried too hard. That was a realization for me. And it was when I stopped caring about what people think of me. I was just fundamentally who I am and authentically myself. It really helped me to accelerate my personal brand because I'm very transparent with people. I tell it like it is. And that reputation has preceded me. It was only until I really put those walls down and just stopped caring that I excelled.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the things, we do a lot of work with influencer development. We teach courses. We help people build their story. And I think that's what you just said is super profound, because what we find, and we deal with this all the time. We just had a client last week, and they're like, no, I don't want people to know that. I don't want people to know that. And I'm like, well, but I mean that's what makes you you. That's what's developed you into the person or the human that you are. This realization that you had that, wow, what if I quit pretending to be somebody else or pretending to be the me that I'm not? And what if I just show up and I'm authentic and I'm
Yep.
genuine and I'm who I am? Well, people still accept me. Who cares? The people that matter to me will accept me, right?
Exactly. And I think also just trying to curate your brand is not the way to go about it. People are going to form opinions about you anyway. People have opinions about me all day long. And it's the moment that you have freedom from that and you don't really care, that you excel, you move forward.
Yeah. And so, when I recently wrote this book, I disclosed a lot of things about my upbringing and things like that were just vulnerable. I had a tough time putting them in there, and it was a lesson for me to know how my clients felt when I would ask them to reveal themselves and to put themselves out there. And isn't it crazy that we have a world where we feel like it can't be that way? Like it's almost like it's not okay to be yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree with you on that. And I think that's the human nature. That's the human tendency to want to relate to people. If you're relatable, people end up liking you no matter what. So one thing I try to do with my clients is find out personal details without prying. Just build their trust. Be a good listener. People love a good listener.
Yeah.
I only compliment people. I use compliments a lot to get into conversations with people. It's just a good starter. But I always compliment them on something I genuinely would compliment someone on. Again, with the authenticity. And then I store those personal details about people up here because it's really important to appeal to who they are and let them know that beyond remembering their name, you remember what's important to them. And the more people talk, the more vulnerable they are with you. And that's kind of how you build that trust basis with people. I've got clients that I work with from 10 years ago now. They're like, I don't even know what you're selling, but we're together again. Let's figure it out. And
Yeah.
I think those partnerships, it's kind of a life source too. It's
Right.
a lifestyle. You have to commit to it daily and 100%.
Well, and I think I believe it actually helps you cope and sort of be in our world today, because there is so much, I don't know, BS on social, on the internet and things like that. And it's almost hard to figure out who the real people are. And I almost caught myself, or I did catch myself early on in social media, is like, oh, I'm a street guy that made it to the boardroom, but I need to be that boardroom guy to the world. I can't be this regular person that grew up and learned all these hard lessons in the street. But then come to find out, that's one of my biggest assets, is the fact that I'm a scrapper. I know how to get things done. I know how to make things happen. I know how to fight my way for my clients, and to fight for us and things like that. So in that was an interesting lesson to me. But I think there's I just think, again, there's too many people seeing other people and going, oh, I have to be like them, so they'll scroll through their feed and things like that and go, oh, okay, I have to. And so they'll put so little about themselves that people never get a chance to know them.
I completely agree with that. One thing I started doing too was just mentoring some of the younger folks.
That's
Miriam had a good comment there. It takes a certain age to accept who you are and never mind. And I think that's the best advice when I mentor folks. And when I go to these conferences too, I've got nothing to lose. I don't know if I'll ever see you again. I don't care. So I'll walk up to people, I'll start conversations. And sometimes it's just a them thing if they don't want to connect with you. You're at a conference for a reason. And I love working with younger folks too, because I think the art of communication is dying essentially. And I think like Gen Xers communicate differently, and I'm right on the cusp. And it's interesting. I've got a very good friend who's actually 8 years my junior, and she'd rather have a conversation on Snapchat. I love her, but that's not my communication preference. Right. So I think just the art of conversation is dying.
Yeah, that's. I'm so glad to hear you say that, and hopefully everybody else is too. I fight so hard. We have a policy in the company. It's like 2 messages and pick up the phone. It's like, let's just talk through, right? So in doing that, thanks, James. Yeah, I think Kelly's definitely right on. And so I just think there's not enough voice contact anymore. In fact, I had a person that I haven't talked to, I'm going to say in 6-7 years, that just called me today, and I forgot about them. And all of a sudden he's like, "Hey, sorry, I just logged into LinkedIn and saw your message from like 6 years ago." He goes, "I don't," and I'm the one that trained him 6 years ago on LinkedIn. He hasn't logged in since. And so I'm laughing about this, and I'm like, "You picked up the phone. That's awesome. I probably should have done the same thing 6 years ago, but I would hit him up on social media." But I just think that too many people don't make the call.
I completely agree. And not to get into dogs too much, but look at dogs. They go right up to each other. They sniff each other. Hey, what are you about? And I think people that have that natural curiosity to get to know you, I think we as people just could always do better with communication and knowing your client's preferred method of communication. That's something that I always ask when I'm starting a relationship with clients. I say, how can I best get in touch with you? What do you prefer? And I'll do everything. I'll call them, LinkedIn. I also love to follow people on social media. And I think that's something that we were talking about at the table too, is you've got everything out there on social media. To have this big personality that then is encapsulated, and it gives people a false sense of connection sometimes, where they know your dog Cookie and they know that Cookie went on an adventure, and it's a little bit invasive sometimes.
Actually, here's what's wrong with that. So I was just talking about this. So a lot of times, you meet up with relatives or people at weddings and funerals, right? Yeah. And so I had to go to a funeral last year, and I'm at a funeral, and I hadn't seen some of these relatives in a while, and I connected, but I knew everything. I was up to date because of social media. So I really had nothing to talk to them about. And I go, I really don't even know if I like some of these people. So you know who you are. So it's just like, but it was just funny because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's almost like social media, even though we can stay caught up, it's given us a reason not to talk to each other. And then when we talk to each other, we have a social awkwardness of what to say sometimes.
Exactly. And like in the dating world, it's even funnier. So, stalking, doing the due diligence before you go on a date.
Ghosting now is a thing, right? Ghosting.
Yeah, ghosting. But, it's hard when you're at dinner not to say, "Oh, I saw your post about your Aunt Tia," or, whatever. It's knowing your limitations on ghosting is when you don't call someone back or text them. There's no continuum.
Or you drop out of their newsfeed.
Yeah, it's awful.
I know. Poor Miriam. She's like, what is ghosting? All these things we must know. So before we move on, because I want to make sure we hit strategic partnerships, because you and I are passionate about this. So, but the thing is, we talk about something, and initially when I studied this, I thought it was preferential. I thought it was generational, right? So if you were to only have one way to communicate with people, what would be your go-to for you, Kelly?
Probably Google Hangouts or video chat, because you can see people's faces. A lot of times you have the tone from the phone, but just seeing people's expressions and how they react to things. I've worked from home for 10 years, so I can't hide this face. Like, someone knows that I'm dismayed when something's going awry. So I much prefer to have in-person virtual conversations.
I agree.
There's nothing like being in person for real, but if you don't have that luxury, definitely Google Hangouts. What about you?
Yeah, I do a lot of Zoom. So Zoom or GoToMeeting, and a little bit of Hangouts too. Skype I gave up on a long time ago. They messed it all up. But so yeah, so what's interesting though is I started, and I've been writing about this too, is called preferential communication, because we have so many options in our world today. There's people that I can't get them to call me back. And I think it was Miriam or somebody that said her daughter-in-law, she will not return voicemail calls. You have to text her in order to get that. Well, that's her method of communication. That's not your method of communication. So we have all these disconnects of people that they're like DM me, or whatever, it's like that's the way. I've got certain people that if I want to get them, I go on LinkedIn and boom, I get them, or I go on Twitter because I know that's how I can get them. So it's funny because and even when we book people for the show, I'll just tell Morgan, Morgan, go into my LinkedIn and just message them. They'll respond right away. And then so she goes and adds me on LinkedIn. Hey, this is Morgan, and Dean needs you on the show. And they're like, oh, great. Sorry. But they missed 3 emails and 2 phone calls.
Yeah, exactly. And I have certain people too. So my company uses Slack, an internal messaging.
Do you like that?
I like Slack. I had to distinguish though, if you need something from me, send me an email or text me, put an action item out there, because if you're slacking it to me, it's just a message. I'm not really going to pay attention to it. And then
that sounds funny. It's like, yeah, well, if you Slack me, I'll read some of them.
I'll get around to it, And I've got friends that just had children, and if you leave them a voicemail, you will never hear back from them. So it's just learning everyone's preferred method of communication.
Yeah. And so like James says in here, you need to relearn communication and interaction standards. It almost needs to be a protocol for people to teach that in company. I think in school,
School, yeah. It's a life skill. I think schools need to do a better job of that. I think teachers have a hard enough job already, but I remember, balancing my checkbook when I was in school, and that was a good life skill to have.
Yeah, I had this young man that was coming to the door to sell something for school, and I always like to support that, even though it was a whole different school district, whatever. But he's coming to the door. I think it was these discount cards that they sell, and so he wouldn't make eye contact with me, and I stood there forever. And then finally he looked up, because I wouldn't respond to him. And I go, I was just waiting for you to make eye contact with me. He goes, oh, I'm sorry. And then we started having a conversation. It was the best conversation ever. And I sent him to 4 neighbors, and he got 4 more deals out of it. But I said, just make sure when you're talking to people, make eye contact and look at the magic in the conversation. And he was like, that's cool. Thank you. So it was just, yeah.
Yeah. My grandmother always said, I don't trust someone that doesn't make eye contact. And to this day, I'm like that. I think someone's a shifty person if they're not looking me in the eyes. I'm wondering what their intention is.
Yeah. And as James says, shift happens. So that's his brand. So there you go. So strategic partnerships. So just tell me so what gravitated you toward, being a specialist or an expert in strategic partnerships? So you and I are both passionate about this. So just go for it. How did you discover that's where the magic is?
Yeah. I went from one role, my first job in the industry, I was there for about 3.5 years. Then I got recruited out, and people called me. I didn't even have to reach out to them. And I was like, whoa, this is to have such close relationship with someone that they don't even know what I'm selling currently. And they reached out to me. So that was kind of my aha moment. And then I just kind of going along with those conferences and not really being in this exclusive circle. When I made friendships or partnerships out in the field at these conferences, I would make sure to connect other people. So I'd look for complementary, business models and just make the connection. And people have always appreciated that about me. I also do a little bit of recruiting on the side. And so in knowing so many people, the recruiting hat really helps them to reach out to me and have a reason to communicate with me outside of the partnership side. So it's kind of a nice, harmless way to stay in contact with folks. But I think after that aha moment, it was just, how many people can I actually meet and forge relationships with? And I think too, it's having the integrity to let someone know that maybe what you're selling isn't good for them, or recommending something else to them. So it's all about reputation. It's about those deep connections, staying in contact. Even when someone doesn't have something to offer you, do you pick up the phone and call them? Do you keep that communication open with them? So social media has been a way for me to stay connected with those folks as they've, been out of a job or going to a new place that might not benefit me. I still want to keep that connection. I still want to know them as a person, and I'm still invested in their lives. So dropping them, a LinkedIn note or texting them or calling them, all of those different methodologies, I like to stay in touch with them.
Yeah, and what you're saying, being in relationship. So it's not just connecting, but it's being in relationship. And I think that's one of the most important things. And I think I told you chapter 3 in my book is about social teaming. And I think that's what really connected me to you, is I could feel like your intent to connect, not just, stay in touch and that sort of thing, but genuinely understand a person and connect to that person.
Definitely. Felt the same way about you.
Yeah. And that's the part that you saw in business, and you do it naturally, which I thought was sort of cool, because you're like, you go in and you actually can see the map of these connections and how valuable they can be. And we were just talking about that, how, more of our clients and customers have to strategically or tactically develop their partnerships. And sometimes I think people belong to things just to belong to things, but it's not structured with the intent for mutuality and to help one another. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. And kindness always goes a long way. It takes so much less effort just to be kind. So if I see someone who's a bit of a loner at a conference, I'll go up and talk to them and introduce them. We've all been there. And so that humanistic quality of just connecting. Everyone wants to connect. Everyone wants to feel like they belong. There's some people that have straight up told me, like, don't talk to me at a conference. And that's fine. Not everyone has good taste. No, I'm just kidding. But I think just being kind, not getting caught up in politics with people. One thing I love to say, if someone's trying to solicit gossip from me or something, I'll always say, well, that person never did anything to me. And it gets them to rethink their motives. But yeah, it's always putting the right pieces of the puzzle together and making sure people are comfortable and they feel included.
Yeah, that's interesting. Feel included. How do you get to, in the conversation, how do you get to, so if you're going to an event and you know that certain people are going to be there, do you case the event first and look for people ahead of time and look at social and say, well, I think that would be a good person for me to connect to, whether it's business or not? Do you go that route?
I go to.
Sorry, I lost your sound.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Typically, the conferences that I go to, there's an option of sponsor, so we'll get the attendee list ahead of time. I'll look at, the usual suspects, folks that I know. I call it my carnival family because I've traveled with them so much. I'll reach out to them. I'll also make sure I make connections before I'm there and say, hey, you guys should really meet up. Looks like you have a similar business model. There might be something complimentary that you can do. I'll also connect with everyone on LinkedIn, or look at their profile, let them know that I'm there. And then sometimes I'll call people ahead of time and say, hey, I want to get the conversation started before the conference even.
That's cool.
And people are pretty eager about that. They're excited. If I see a new face too, I'll call them and I'll say, hey, I think you're new to the circuit. Is this your first conference? This particular type of conference? And typically they'll say yes. And I'll say, let's meet up at registration the moment you get there. And I want to introduce you to people. So it goes a long way.
Wow, Kelly, it's like we were separated at birth. Well, there's something that we call hosting. So, and that's exactly what you described. So, what happens is, whether it's your event or not, you treat the event as if it's your event, and then you welcome and host people. And it's interesting because the people that actually work the event then will actually you know be more connected to you and be willing to connect you to more people. It's just, and so that's something that as an organization we've been practicing forever. But when we go to an event, we're going to help out. We're going to be the ambassadors for that event. And like you said, it helps bring comfort to the people that are at an event. So like any networking event or whatever, you see people that are lost, they're wandering around, and now all of a sudden you can sort of be that ambassador, and it really builds some amazing relationships.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I didn't know the term for it, but now I do. I used to also like case the joint ahead of time, where I would look on LinkedIn and look for social trending around the particular hashtag for the conference. I would I would copy and paste people's face and their names on like a Google Doc, and I'd print it, and it was like my little handy dandy guide that I would take, and I'd stalk people. I'd go up to them and I'd say, "Hey, we should talk about this, that, and the other thing." And they'd be like, "How do you know my name?" But they're impressed that you're that much of a stalker. So it's cool.
Yes. So you and I both came out of hospitality per se. You said you waited tables. I bust, and I thought I was actually going to go into hospitality, and then I wound up in technology. But I always wonder that those of us that inherently work events well, and I'm always curious, like who in the audience came from hospitality, but somewhere in that business. But it's always interesting to me when I find people that started in hospitality, and all of a sudden they're very welcoming, they're nurturing, they're hosting automatically. That becomes part of who they are, and they're helping people, along the way, if you will.
Absolutely. I mean, no one has time for an ego. Humility goes a long way. I was at a conference a couple years ago, and the waitress dropped a tray, and everyone just stood there, and it baffled me, because it's like, okay, really, we're all in our suit jackets, and nobody's going to help her. So I think pitch in where you can, and show that you're human, even if it's the unpopular thing to do. The other thing that I learned in hospitality too is no one wants to know your sad stories, really, or anything bad is going on in your life. How many times have you had a server come up to you and you ask them how their day is, and they're like, "Oh, I'm miserable." Nobody wants that. Nobody wants a Debbie Downer, and such is life. If you need to talk about those things, get a therapist.
Yeah, right. What's interesting about that is we were out at a really nice place, great reputation, and this poor server was just fumbling and having problems. He had trouble opening the wine, and he was nervous, and he was running around, and he was stressed. And I was just like, "Hey, you know what? It's okay. You're doing fine. And it was just those words of encouragement, and then when the manager came around, I was just like, "Hey, listen, everything's fine." She was checking up on him, and they were sort of helping to pick up a little bit of the slack and things like that. And I was like, "No, he's doing great." So I didn't know if he was new or not, but I was like, you're doing fine. You're doing a good job. And at first, I caught myself getting a little agitated, and I'm like, "Well, wait a minute. There was a time when you were in hospitality, and I can remember I was bussing tables, and there were some politicians in this restaurant and things like that. And all of a sudden, I dropped a thing of sour cream, and it got on this guy's suit, and I was just like, ah, and then the manager comes running over, and I was like, so I think of that moment because I felt like I just wanted to crawl under the booth and hide. But then people were just like, "It's okay. No, it's all right. It was an accident. It didn't mean to happen." And it was that forgiveness in the world that I think we need a little more of, because people seem just a little too tense to want to just ignore or blame. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I had a I had a story similar to that. I was at this Italian restaurant, and I was carrying linguine with white clams out, and this woman at this table was horrible to me. It was, some people just like to make an example out of you and just like throw you to the wolves. And it was it was like a 10 top. And I brought her dish out, and the clam juice dumped out of the dish into her purse. And I locked eyes with the guy across from her who was like allegedly her boyfriend or whatever. And he's like, and he didn't say anything. She called the next day to complain. I probably should have owned it, but it just goes to show karma. White clam sauce will get you.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy. That's crazy.
It was so bad. Yeah. But I mean, I think it should be a requirement too that someone who's going into the world either has retail experience or, some sort of waiting or service industry experience, because it definitely primes you for life. There's nothing that I feel I can't deal with at this point.
Right. And we say that social media, when in our training, one of the first things that we do is we're like, well, who here has worked an event? Who's part of an event? And then, are you good, or what do you do at events and things like that? And we say, treat social media like it's an event. So treat LinkedIn when you go there, this is an event. And then we tell them to be a host of the event and host your network and really make them feel welcome to be part of your network. And it really takes on a whole new context and meaning when you start hosting people on social media. And the people that, you don't need 10,000 followers or people or connections to be successful. I mean, you could have 20, 30, 50, it doesn't matter. So the people that are, sort of not the right ones to be there, just silently dismiss them. They don't have to be at that party.
Also, a lesson I learned, you never know when someone you work with is going to become a competitor, or a competitor is going to become a client. So, that old saying, may the bridges you burn light your way forward. No, that doesn't apply. Everyone holds value. Every relationship you have, no one holds more or less value than the next person. So I always like to be diplomatic with my competitors, and, you never know when you're going to work together one day.
Yeah, right on. Well, Kelly, as always, every time you and I have a conversation, it's like there's this synergistic thing. There's so many things we have in common. And I think that's how we connected so well when we were in St. Louis. And it was just like, oh my gosh. And so that's why I couldn't wait to have you on. And I knew there would be some cool nuggets. So at this point, we like to invite Jackson and Monica back on to hear what they learned. But what I'd like to do is ask the audience, what did you take away? So we always want to make sure that you take something away that maybe you used to do or you forgot, but maybe there's something that you heard that is something useful for yourself. So I want the audience to chime in and type that in. Like, what is your big takeaway in this conversation with Kelly? And then Monica, what did you hear?
First off, I would like to say your story is really incredible from, where you started. I also hated math growing up. It was the worst subject for me. I still struggle with it. But I really appreciated the fact that when you said you follow the people, you follow those leaders that have made an impact in your life, and continue to stay connected with them, because you never know where your paths will cross again.
Yeah. Jackson, how about you?
Yeah. I think just the being, very diplomatic to, everyone, every relationship you have, everything like that. I really, I love that. And it's crazy that you said that, because I came across a quote yesterday by Tolstoy saying, there's only one time that is important, and it's now. It is the most important time because it's the only time we have any power. And what he meant by that was that, being with that person, the most important person that you have in your life is the person that's in front of you right now. That's the most important relationship you have at the moment, is the one that's right in front of you. So just be there, be in the now, and not worrying about like, oh, I have a meeting in like 40 minutes, I have to be for that, but I think that's another great way to look at it, is like those two things go hand in hand, is being there with someone and being diplomatic to every person that you meet, because it's like, you never know, like you said, when your paths are going to cross again, whether you're going to work together, be a competitor, things like that. It's just, there's so many moving variables in life, especially today. Everyone's connected through every social media and every which way. So it's, that was probably the biggest thing that I took away.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So Kelly, any thoughts from your perspective on, reflecting back and things like that? And then we'd also like to know if there's certain people that have inspired you along the way, and maybe books or authors or people that you follow as well.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So just reflecting on, my pastime and knowing the people that I know and building those connections. There's a book out there called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Bleep. I can't say it, but it's by Mark Mangum, I think.
Okay.
It helped me so much in just letting go. I'm like a dog in the sense, if I know someone doesn't like me, it will kill me. It will literally, I'm dead, deceased. I need to make them like me immediately. And that's how I used to be. Now, after reading that book, it really gave me the opportunity to do some deep self-reflection and say, maybe I'm just not their flavor. Maybe I'm not their brand. And it's okay. Not everyone has to like you. So that's another kind of hard lesson I had to learn over time. There's also, I listen to a lot of HBR, Harvard Business Review podcasts. There's one out there that I really like, and it's called The Harsh Reality of Innovative Companies. If you're trying to breathe new life into your company right now, or you've just hit like kind of a dead spot in your career, I highly recommend that one. And then this is a little bit personal, but I listened to a lot of TED Talks, and there was one, it went viral. Nora McInerny, McInerny. We don't move on from grief, we move forward with it. And that's more of a personal one. It's September 11th, so I figured it might be nice to offer that one up. But if anyone has something that's holding them back and it's grief related, that really helped me to cope with some personal grief that I was facing and move on.
Yeah, that's good. So thank you for that. That's huge. And so we always ask that our audience take things that they learn and really help somebody that's around you. You just never know what they're going through, what they're experiencing, or what space they're in. But, we want you to take, and you're all thought leaders and influencers, in our minds and should be in your minds. So make sure you take what you learned from Kelly and share that with someone today. And just have the conversation, open up and be that good relationship connector to them. And they might be in a place where they really need that right now. And so, Kelly, I just want to say, thank you for sharing your story with us and your path, and then your knowledge on everything. So it's been a true delight to have you on.
Absolutely. And thank you all so much for your time. There are a couple of tools too that I just wanted to recommend to you for some happy networking. It's a tool called Rapportive, Rapportive. I believe HubSpot actually bought them, but if you have Gmail, you can download it. It's an extension in Chrome, and it sits in your inbox. So if you're trying to do lead gen or do some cold outreach, if you guess the person's email address properly, they pop up in a little window. So Rapportive confirms that it's their proper email.
Awesome.
There's also this company called Redbooks. Pricing's a couple $1,000s a year, but you get one seat and you can get all of the contacts you need there, so you don't have to do that guesswork. And then also, I just strongly recommend that you connect with your work connections more on social media, even if you have to create a more professional profile and then just connect with people there. It tells you everything you need to know about them. It keeps you in touch with them, and it's a great tool to have. But I'm sure you all already knew that.
Well, yeah, but let's not take it for granted. It builds a stronger culture too.
Mm-hmm. Definitely does.
Yeah.
So thank you guys so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
And Jackson, who are the 2 winners today?
So for Zoom, we have James Feldman, and Facebook Live, we have Laurel Zeman.
Laurel.
So yeah. And then real quick, we have a note from our sponsor. The Influence Factory is brought to you by Planable. Planable gives you your social media team everything you need to move their creative process forward. Planable allows you to preview social media posts as though they are live. No more screenshots, mock-ups, or endless number of Excel spreadsheets. Your clients can review content from within the platform. Planable.io. Start your free trial today.
And Monica, you love Planable, right?
I do. New favorite platform.
Right. All right, everybody. I want to thank all of our guests that were on today. And I also want to thank Kelly for being on, and everybody that listened in and that listens to the podcast. We appreciate you. Remember, pass that on, the things that you learned today, with somebody that you care about. And then we'll definitely see you in the next episode online. Thanks, everybody, and take care. Woo!
Thank you for listening to the Influence Factory podcast. We welcome feedback and suggestions. You can provide these by visiting our website at www.myinfluencefactory.com. And if you are interested in Social Jack's 90 Days to Influence program, you can simply go to 90daystobusinessinfluence.com and simply ask for the next steps. While our program airs regularly on Zoom webcasts and Facebook Live on Wednesdays at noon Central, we invite you to download episodes on your favorite channel: YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and who knows where else in the future. We will also provide occasional on-location live streams with special guests that we will announce in our community Facebook group, Business Influencer Alliance, as well as on all Social Jack channels. Our mission is to help you build your digital business influence with this podcast, as well as inspire, educate, and entertain those who are hungry to collaborate in a cool place with cool business professionals just like you.